Okay, so we'll address that in December, the dollar amount.
Probably, yes.
Correct.
Okay.
In addition to Alan.
So what's before us is, do we want to amend the contract
Correct.
with Alan?
Correct.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same
Aye.
sign. Motion passes. We'll go ahead and go to item number 6, the Bureau of Equalization 2017 Equalization Report. Darrell.
This is a request to recommend to the board to adopt the 2017 Equalization Report. The Bureau of Equalization has completed its review of the 2017 assessment rolls of the 21 townships and 9 cities of the county. The Bureau of Equalization recommends adoption of the state equalized value of real and personal property in the total combined amount of $25.9 billion. This is an increase of 7.4% over the 2016 state equalized value. The state taxable value of real and personal property is $21.8 billion, an increase of 3.4% over the 2016 taxable value. The equalized values have been prepared in accordance with the state statute and in time to be submitted to the State Tax Commission by the required deadline of May 1.
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Support.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Discussion, questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Voorhees.
Thank you, Chair Jones. So this is automatically a 7.4% increase in the taxable value,
Equalized value.
the equalized value, but our taxable is still with the proposal A or what?
Well, yeah, and that's why it's capped at 3.4%.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mast.
But now, not every, the 3.4 is the county portion, but when you look at the chart on page, the chart with the individual cities and townships, it jumps around quite a bit. Fortunately, nobody went down, but some of them barely an increase in taxable value. I mean, they just had the 0.9%. Less than 1%. Still not rolling in the money, unfortunately. Proposition A is doing its thing.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Did you have a comment? Pardon? Did you have a comment on this?
Just that, no, I think you pretty much summed it up. It's 7.4 is the equalized and 3.4 is the overall tax.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We'll go to item 7 from Fiscal Services, Election Software and Strategic Capital CIP Projects. Darrell?
This is a request to recommend to the board to appropriate $950,000 from the county general fund to the Capital Improvement Program Fund for election software and strategic capital projects. Upon approval of the special millage for the zoo and museum, funding was made available through in the 2017 general fund budget to reallocate to other important needs that would have been recommended in the 2017 budget if funding had been available. The reallocation of the available general fund budget was reviewed and discussed in detail during a board work session and Finance and Physical Resources Committee meeting held in March of 2017. The state is requiring local units to update its election equipment and associated hardware and software. While most of the funding will come from federal and state sources, the county is required to make an initial investment of $100,000. The Strategic Capital CIP project was established in 2015 pursuant to a space needs study and a needs assessment of existing facilities and infrastructure. Funding transferred to the Strategic Capital CIP would establish additional resources that may be needed to construct, renovate, raise, and equip various county facilities. It is recommended that $950,000 be appropriated from the general fund to the 2017 CIP fund budget for election software and strategic capital projects.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Support.
Thank you. Discussion, questions, and comments. Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
I just want to clarify my understanding. The 100K is the initial down payment, if you will, on the elections equipment. The 850 is what we've been talking about, transferring the marginal difference with the zoo millage now in effect into the CIP.
Yes, and I'm hoping that the 100,000 will be more, will be our share period.
Okay.
For the election equipment.
Great.
Okay, Commissioner Antwer?
Thank you. The $100,000, do you know the math behind it, or how they came up with that figure? Or?
I do not. We haven't received any direct information from the state or the clerk regarding this. This is the estimate from the clerk's office.
It just seems like one of those numbers that nice round.
Yeah, it's a nice round number,
K.
exactly.
There must have been some science behind that or some formula, but.
I think it was based on a percentage basis, and we're still gathering that information because I believe the clerk has just had the opportunity with the local clerks to review the 3 vendors that have been put forward by the state for us to consider, and they're in that decision-making mode right now.
Due diligence is
Yeah.
taking place.
Yeah, it'll be one of the 3 vendors, I'm just not sure which one.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Voorhees.
Okay, thanks. Sure, John. Why do we have to appropriate the strategic capital now and not just the 100,000 of initial investment? Why the whole amount rather than what's necessary now? And
Well, we've over the past several months had several discussions, and that was the staff's proposal. It seemed to be, at least several times we've talked, the consensus of the Finance Committee. So it's up to you as to whether you want to do it. That's our recommendation from staff. We're setting aside money in the capital improvement program. This is money that's not being spent, and I'd rather professionally recommend that it be placed in the capital improvement program rather than remain in operations.
Commissioner Talon?
Thank you, Chair. I've expressed this in the various meetings that we have had about what to do with these funds, and that is that I continue to be concerned about allocating dollars for facilities that we really don't have a handle on what's going to happen and what is likely to happen. There's a lot of things in the air, whereas there are needs in this community that we do know about, and I would much prefer to see these dollars allocated to that. So I'd like to continue to hear some discussion, but before we call for the question, I'd like to potentially offer an amendment.
Okay.
I support that.
Anyone else?
Well, thank
Yes,
you, Chair.
Commissioner Mast.
It was helpful to get the clerk's memo, I guess, about the process that she's gone through and done all of this stuff here, so I don't know that we need any more information. That was very helpful to me. I think there's $2 million being allocated by the state to all of the counties to do this. I mean, it's a relatively small amount, so hopefully the 100,000 is what we're going to spend ourselves, and hopefully then, I don't know, another 100 from the state probably or so, because that $2 million isn't going to go very far.
I haven't received a whole lot of information about
I mean,
this.
so theoretically, every county is going to get whole new election equipment, which should help a lot. And I think they're doing it now because it's got to be in place this November already. I think the intent is to have new equipment for the November general election.
Correct.
I hope she's doing a good job, and we will have new equipment. Great.
All right.
That's my comment.
Commissioner Talon, did you want to circle back on your point?
Sure. Unless there's other discussion, I'd like to offer an amendment to delete the allocation to the strategic capital projects of $850,000, so that the motion would be simply to appropriate the dollars for the election software, $100,000. So I move that amendment.
And I support it.
Okay. So if I'm not mistaken, first we vote on the amendment, and then we go back to vote on the question. All right, so let's discuss the amendment. at this point. Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
I think I understand the reason for the amendment and certain projects and tasks that the county may engage in, such as lead remediation or others that would fall outside of the CIP. However, I'm not going to support the amendment because I do think that the CIP process and its allocation process is a pretty good one, and I think tying up these funds in that process, we know there's a lot of unmet needs in that process, and I support putting these funds into that process, whether they go ultimately towards zoo facilities or parks acquisition or whatnot, will still be part of that process of decision making in the future. But I would support tying up these funds in the CIP, so I'm not in favor of the amendment.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Voorhees?
Thank you. In response to Commissioner Coleman, it's part of the $20 million windfall that we got with the zoo museum tax. And just to piecemeal it out ahead of time, rather than looking at getting together a little more extensive plan than what I think we have done, is where I'm at. And so I'm sure when the time comes, if we know that this is the machinery cost and it's going to be $890,000, we'll do that. But why commit early and why just piecemeal these dollars out when we should look at it, I think, in a more comprehensive package? So, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Mance.
Well, I pretty much am going to be voting against that amendment too, because I think we've had quite a few discussions about this issue, and I think we need to trust the process that the administrator has set up, and he's got a good process. If we hold it up, then that whole $850,000 gets held up with a lot of things. So let's move forward with getting it aside and letting him go through the process. And I like the capital improvement project too. So I will be voting no on that amendment.
And I will add that this is a recommendation to go to the board. So the final decision is not made here, it's made at the board. So this is a recommendation that can go to the board to then hash out and be decided there. This is just, this puts it on the agenda for the board. So, you know, that this doesn't decide it at this point, okay? This just takes it to the next level. Commissioner Talon?
Thank you, Chair. There's some language in here that is a bit confusing to me, and I'm wondering if we could clarify. The fourth bullet point talks about the strategic capital CIP, which my assumption was that we were allocating this $850,000 to that because it spends an entire bullet talking about it. But the next bullet says it's just going into the general fund CIP fund. So I guess my question is, where is that going? Is it, you know, to Commissioner Coleman's point, you could infer from this that it's not going into the general CIP, but it's going into that strategic capital CIP, which is specifically for the space needs study project. So what are we talking here?
Well, I'm looking at the bullets. One is the fourth one down says the strategic capital CIP, which is part of the capital improvement program. And the last bullet talks about going from the general fund to the strategic capital projects and the election software.
Okay, so it's not going into the general CIP for whatever we might allocate it for later on. It's already being allocated to a specific
There is a line or specific item in the CIP that's a strategic capital. Now that, in turn, is going to be one that we draw on to allocate to other projects. So it could be allocated to other projects. We don't know what this, everything is contingent in terms, or a lot of things are contingent in terms of the CIP on the 82 Ionia sale. If it doesn't sell, then we may take that money and use it to do some other things in our needs, capital needs.
Could I continue to, because this is not clear to me yet. I thought I just heard you say that even though it's being allocated to the strategic capital projects, it could be used for other things?
It depends on what happened. It'll be in the CIP, okay, capital improvement program. The strategic capital project is a category within the CIP. So there may be other needs that are, let's say 82 Ionia is not sold, and we don't have the fallout or the domino effect that would result in moving all of those employees. Then we could look at what we would do with that capital fund.
And 82 Ionia is the only trigger for looking at what to do with that?
Well,
This
that's
is
the
all
major,
kind of-
that's the major trigger at this point,
yeah.
because we're expecting to receive proposals in May. We'll have to evaluate those proposals if they are what we think we should receive in terms of funding. That will trigger some things. If we decide that we aren't getting the proposal that we thought, then we have to come back to the drawing board and decide what we're going to do with that facility, whether we're going to keep it. It may be required that we put money into that facility. I think it gives us a little bit of flexibility and adds a little bit more resources to the CIP than we currently have right now.
Daryl, just a point of clarification, with this request that we're working on now, does that allocate the rest? Does that take care of the rest of the money from the Zoo Museum millage, or is there still more?
No, there's still a little bit more.
How much, do you know approximately?
Oh, I'm going to ask Marvin for that figure.
Because I think that's important to know going into this. So how much is left if, and I know we're on the other motion here, which would be pulling this out, but if this in total goes as originally presented, the 950, how much is left, Marvin?
The only additional appropriation that would be required is the $300,000 to go towards the Hazy Cloud project, and that'll come later when the grant funding is awarded.
Okay. So what would be left is 300,000, but we've already potentially discussed that going to Chief
Correct.
Hazy Cloud.
Correct. The other balances can be handled administratively within the general fund.
Because it's nominal.
That we're appropriating these to the other funds so they can be spent in the CIP fund, for example. So.
Okay. That was my question. Hang on, I've got a list of people. Commissioner Kallman is next.
It's been a while since I've done a thorough reading of the standing rules, but I think there's a provision there that allows any commissioner to ask for a resolution to be split if the questions can stand on their own. And in that case, I would think that would be a good way we could handle this, is the questions could stand on their own, and then we could look at them specifically at the full board level. Am I recalling the standing rules correctly?
He has a copy, so let's let Tom do a quick look. Well, as Tom looks, my thought is, even if that is the case, right now, we still have a motion on the floor that has been seconded, which is an amendment to what we currently have, which is to remove the 850. So even if that is the case, we have to deal with the one that's currently on the floor. And then we can look at something else, but we'll give Tom some extra time to continue to look. So let Tom look, and we have Commissioner Antor next up with a comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Daryl kind of answered my question. This resolution as currently written gives you, county, a little bit of flexibility. For me, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other, I guess. I'm not too worried about the way it's written here is okay, unless I see something really compelling to think that there's something else going on here. It just seems like flexibility is a good thing at this point. And when in doubt, we'll know, I guess.
Okay, Commissioner Mast, you
Well,
were on the list
I
next.
just kind of wanted to follow up a little bit on your comment saying, regardless what we do here, the board, the full board will make the decision. But I think if we decide here to remove that 850, all we're recommending to the full board is the 100.
Correct.
And they won't have a choice. I mean,
Right.
They won't have we will handle the 850 here, I guess is what I'm saying, I think.
Right, I mean, we have a level of decision-making here with what we recommend, but we're not the final decision. So, you know, in a way, we do take something off the table if this passes.
Well, so theoretically,
We're making the decision for what the full board can decide.
but theoretically, if that substitute motion to pull 850 out passes, one of the commissioners could make an amendment to the full board saying, let's put it back in.
I don't see why not. You
I mean,
know,
Saying
Yeah,
we didn't
that's correct.
we didn't like the decision
No,
of the
that's
finance
correct.
committee. Yeah, I mean, so is that correct?
That is correct.
I think that's what you were trying to say.
Actually, Commissioner Coleman has pointed out there is section 3.15 in our standing rules that says if a pending motion or resolution or an amendment either contains two or more parts capable of standing as separate questions, upon motion of any member, the board must vote on each part separately. Okay. Now, in effect, what you have is an amendment that has been offered and seconded to remove a portion so that the first question, you know, you're getting to a point where you're dividing that by the amendment that's being offered. So you're trying to determine whether or not you want to divide it right now with this amendment.
Okay. Okay.
okay. Well, it divides it, but it takes it off the table versus having them.
Correct. It takes the 850 off the table. There would have to
Right.
be a subsequent motion regarding
Right.
the 850.
Which potentially would split it, which would then have them looked at as separate questions. That's still a possibility depending on what happens after this is
Correct.
reviewed and discussed. Okay. So right now, just to clarify, we are on the amendment, which is to pull out the strategic capital 850,000 allocation. Is there any other comments or discussion on that amendment that has been motioned and seconded? Yes, Commissioner Talon.
Just clarification, I appreciated the splitting the question because that was what I preferred to do initially, but I just thought that the clarity wasn't there on the procedure, and I thought it would be easier to simply amend it, because I think, as what I thought I heard Tom just say, is that they essentially do the same thing to a great extent.
At least by passing the amendment, you are voting then simply on amending the budget by adding the $100,000 for the election equipment. You're leaving the question of the 850 out there. With the motion to divide the question, you're going to have two votes. You're going to vote on one and then vote on the second.
Right. So let's take care of the amendment. If there's no other discussion or comments on the amendment as is, which is again, deleting the 850 allocation to the strategic capital account. Yes, Commissioner Womack.
Is Commissioner Talon able to withdraw his motion, or he can't do that now and go with Commissioner Coleman's motion? It seems like they're getting on the same page.
Well, we don't have a motion from Commissioner Coleman. What we have is the amendment from Commissioner Talon.
That was I was addressing.
So
He
you're
can't
asking if
withdraw
he
it.
could withdraw it. Can he withdraw it?
Right now, it's been moved and seconded. It's now owned by the body.
Yep.
So
If I
the body
withdraw
has
it
to.
and the seconder withdraws,
The
then
second,
it's
they
off.
both withdraw it, you can withdraw the question.
And we'll go to a split.
I'm willing to withdraw the motion to amend.
I move it.
Okay, so we now have this amendment withdrawn. And do we have to vote on that? I'm withdrawing the amendment?
No.
Okay,
Now the question is whether you want to replace that with the division of the question.
Yeah, I'm happy to make the motion to divide the question.
okay. So we have a motion on the table
Support that.
to divide the items in this action request. So just to clarify, it would be to vote for the elections allocation and the strategic capital allocation separately. Is that correct, Commissioner Coleman?
Correct.
And is that correct, Commissioner Talon? All right. Now, we can have discussion, questions, comments on this. Is this a motion? Yes.
Correct.
On this motion.
And just to clarify, I should have brought my Robert's Rules of Order this morning, but right now we're just voting to split, and then we'll address the resolutions separately.
Correct.
Okay.
So
Thank
this
you.
is the motion to split it, and then there'll be, we'd have to vote on, we need additional motions?
2 motions after that.
Then we need 2 motions after that to vote, one on the elections and one on the strategic capital part.
Correct.
And then they would both, that would approach the board then separately on both of them if they pass. So, there we have it. That's what we have. Is there any other comments, questions, or discussion on the splitting of the 2 items? All right, seeing none, I'm going to request a roll call vote for this vote so that we have that clear for the record.
Commissioner Womack?
Aye.
You said aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Coleman?
Aye.
Commissioner Mast?
No.
Commissioner Hennessy?
Yes.
Commissioner Talon?
Yes.
Commissioner Voorhees?
Yes.
Commissioner Antor?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes. So that motion passes. So what we will do now is see if there is a motion for the election software of $100,000.
So moved.
Okay. Is there?
Support.
And support. And I would like to be consistent, so with this also, I'd like to do and request a roll call vote. So can we have a roll call vote on this too, please?
We have discussion.
Yes. Well, thanks. We'll have discussion before we get to that point. Is there any other comments, questions, or discussions on the election equipment software allocation of $100,000? Yes, Commissioner
Just
Antor.
to reiterate the comment about the 100,000, I know there's some due diligence. I'm still wondering how that number, they came up with it. So that's my only question about that. And I know it's being worked on, but I just want to make the point that we need to look at things like that, not just assume that they're there for a valid reason.
Does Marvin have any additional information?
That's the number that came from the clerk.
Okay. All right. So that would be a good thing to note if this passes prior to our board meeting.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or discussion before we go to a vote on the election software of $100,000 allocation? All right. Could we have a roll call vote on this, please, Pam?
Commissioner Womack?
Yeah.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Mast?
Yes.
Commissioner Hennessy?
Yes.
Commissioner Talon?
Yes.
Commissioner Voorhees?
Yes.
Commissioner Antor?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes. Okay, so that motion passes. Now we'd be potentially looking for a motion on the strategic capital $850,000 allocation.
So,
Okay.
Support.
Okay, moved and supported. Questions, comments, and discussion again on this part of the motion. Commissioner Voorhees.
Thank you, Chair Jones. thanks for your work on that. I'll be voting no, because I think, as I understood from Darrell, that the money will be put there, but can be used for something else under the CIP project, depending upon Ionia or maybe some other. So it is not a definite expenditure to purchase something. It's to put the money there. We might need it for that, but it might go some other way, and I'm going to vote no on that.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
So I'm going to vote yes, but I would like for the 27th to have a little more information per Commissioner Talon's question about if it goes into the CIP, how encumbered it is based on the outcome of 82 Ionia.
I don't think it's encumbered at all. I mean, that's the design right now. It could be, there's nothing that precludes the Board of Commissioners at some point in time taking the reverse action and taking money out of the CIP and putting it in the general fund.
Okay.
This is a board decision. You have a staff recommendation. There are many, we get $10, $12 million of capital improvement requests on an annual basis, and we appropriate about $5 to $6 million. So what we are trying to do is get more resources in our CIP in order to address our capital improvement program needs. This is one mechanism to do it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, discussions? Yes, Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. You know, what Darrell says is certainly true, that nothing precludes the board from making a change, but the reality and the history is that generally the board, and once this decision is made to put it in the CIP, the board traditionally doesn't mess around with those kinds of decisions. We have the opportunity to change anything that's recommended by the CIP committee, but we historically don't do that. So yes, technically we can make that change, but that's certainly not been the history of how this board works. This really is, we're deciding it right here, practically speaking.
Yes, Commissioner Voorhees.
Thank you. And to that point, that's why I've kind of encouraged that we should have either the chair of this committee or members of this committee on the CIP, because we are not having elective input into the decision. We are, as was stated many times, we're approving what comes out of the recommendation of the CIP group. And that's my concern with putting money into the CIP group without more elective input into the decision-making there. So.
Okay. Any further questions, comments, or discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, to stay consistent with what we've done so far with this, I'd like to request a roll call vote. So Pam, if we could do this for this one, I'd appreciate it.
Commissioner Womack?
No.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Mast?
Yes.
Commissioner Hennessy?
No.
Commissioner Talon?
No.
Commissioner Voorhees?
No.
Commissioner Antor?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes. What happens in a tie? Motion fails, right?
It does not pass.
All right, in a tie vote, the motion does not pass, so the board will not see that part of the request. All right, that brings us to item 8 for miscellaneous. Is there any commissioner miscellaneous this morning? Yes, Commissioner Womack.
I just want to thank Sheriff Stelma for letting me bring a young at-risk youth to his office this week that I had a chance to take to the county jail, who had a family member he kind of looks up to, and then I actually got to take him to the other side to see Sheriff Stelma. Found out Sheriff Stelma is great with kids, and when I got in the car with this young kid, he said he wants to be a sheriff deputy. So things happening in Kent County.
Excellent. Any other commissioner miscellaneous this morning? Okay, seeing none, we will adjourn to our next meeting date of Tuesday, May 2nd at 8:30 a.m.